And it's been a challenging few weeks together in this process. We have been challenged to look at ourselves and our society and see things that have been unjust and unfair for Black people in this country since its founding. It feels very fitting to me, actually, that we had to reschedule and finish this series during the month of Elul. This is the month leading up to the high holidays that asks us to be introspective. We ask ourselves the hard questions. Where have I not lived up to my highest ideals over the course of the last year? When was I angry instead of patient, mean instead of loving, defensive instead of being willing to change? When did I decide to be silent when I should have taken action? We take time during this month every day to be introspective and attempt to answer hard questions when we listen to the blast of the shofar every morning. The shofar is the primal sound of Judaism. When it is sounded, it is the time to reflect without words. And for people who love books and love words, it's a time to remind us every day to be where we are and to just feel what we feel. It's a time for a kind of meditation. The shofar has 3 sounds, and there are many different interpretations as to what each sound can mean, but I'll just share a few. There's the tkiya, the tu, so one singular blast, and it can be interpreted as a kind of summons. Come here and listen, something is about to happen. It can also be seen as a reminder of God's presence in the world. God's presence in the world is often manifested through us. Like Rabbi Katz said a few weeks ago, tkiya can be a reminder that we are all a refraction of God's image walking on this earth who need to respect and love each other. Shfarim, that's the 3 medium length blasts, the to-do, 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 which literally, and the word literally means breaks or fractures. This sound is traditionally seen as crying, as pouring out our hearts for the brokenness in the world and in ourselves. The Kabbalists say that shfarim is the sobbing cry of a Jewish heart, yearning to connect, to grow, to achieve, and to do better. And finally, Torah, the is those quick blasts that represent an alarm clock, trying to rouse us from the unaware state we have been in. The Rambam writes that the shofar says, wake up, search your ways and return to tshuva, to repentance, and remember your creator. Examine your souls and improve your ways and your motivations. And during Elul, the commentator Malbim writes that we need to wake up and be honest and objective about our lives, who we are, where we've been, and which direction we're headed. The Torah sound rouses us from our spiritual slumber. The shofar brings clarity, alertness, and focus. These 3 sounds are different ways to remind us of the deep work of introspection we are asked to do in preparation for the high holidays. As Rabbi Alan Liu writes in my favorite high holiday book, This Is Real and You Are Completely Unprepared, quote, a great horn calls you to remember, but all you can remember is how much you have forgotten. Every day for a month, you sit and try to remember who you are and where you are going. By the last week of this month, your need to know these things weighs upon you. Your prayer becomes urgent, end quote. We have been at this work as a community for a little over a month. We have been trying to figure out who we individually, as a synagogue, and as a country are, and where we are going. We have had moments of tkiya, where we are summoned to witness and to learn. When we reminded ourselves we are all human, created in God's image, and it is systems put in place by our society that have created inequity. We have had moments of Torah, when we opened our hearts and shed, of Shfarim, when we opened our hearts and shed tears over the injustice of our country has wrought on so many of its citizens. We cried when we heard the story of Reverend Cabrera, who struggled to be taken seriously in the emergency room due to the color of his skin until he said he was a city councilman. Many of us cried again this week as Jacob Blake was shot by police in front of 3 of his children. And we've experienced an alarm clock ringing in our ears, going off over and over and over again, like Torah, learning about the systems in place in our country that privilege those who are white and disenfranchise those who are Black. We've seen that in housing discrimination and healthcare disparities. We've seen that racism is internalized in us to a degree we didn't realize as we read White Fragility together. We've had to awaken to the fact that there was so much we didn't know, and there's so much more we have to learn. Tonight, we're going to continue that work of introspection, a deep dive into ourselves to see what tshuva, what repentance, what work we need to do as we begin this new Jewish year in just a few weeks. And this work of introspection can be exhausting, especially in a world faced with a pandemic, economic stress, and in a country roiling under systemic racism. It can feel like there's little compassion left to give. Rabbi Joshua Weissman wrote about compassion fatigue and how it is actually a misnomer. Empathy is a feeling for another's suffering, while compassion implies action. Call it compassionate action. And empathy fatigue, getting overloaded by just feelings for others' suffering, is a real problem. Just feeling and feeling and feeling for all the suffering around us can really overwhelm our systems and lead us to shut down. This is where compassionate action comes in. When we take our empathy, our broken hearts and tears, and act to relieve suffering, our whole systems change. Our circuits stop being overloaded, a whole new set of pathways in our mind and hearts are activated, and the overwhelmed feeling stops. So as we listen to the cry of the shofar and all its valences, including the tears encoded in it, as we connect on these high holidays with our own heartbreak at the state of the world, and even our own modest failings, let us connect with our broken hearts for the sake of compassionate action. End quote. Tonight is one chance to start connecting with our broken hearts and start thinking about what compassionate action we want to take next. It's a chance to say, now what? I'd like to take a minute in a second and ask my husband Matan to blow the shofar for us. If you feel comfortable, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and just listen to the primal sounds of the shofar. As we go into this session, I want you to listen to see what feelings are coming up for you as the shofar is sounded. What awareness do you have of the divine in the world? What are you feeling brokenhearted about? What alarm clock is ringing deep within you? All right, now turn it over to Matan. Thank you.